YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 30th Anniversary Comic Special. So this is kind of like an annual format, a one-shot larger issue that has a handful of related MMPR stories in honor of the anniversary all throughout the timelines and multiverse of the franchise. And it includes a collection of pretty solid and well-done stories, ones with a lot of heart. I have some mixed feelings on the package overall, but I'll talk about that at the end. So the first story is an Ernie-focused story, kind of an Ernie tribute, just a really small story showcasing Ernie kind of just being overwhelmed by the day in and day out of running the juice bar, and he's thinking of selling it because he's kind of overwhelmed and feels like it's not making a difference. And he winds up running into the Rangers when they're fighting an enemy, and he actually winds up like throwing a brick at the monster and distracting him long enough so the Rangers can blow him up. And he has a nice interaction with the Rangers where he's like, yeah, I'm going to be selling the juice bar, and the Rangers effectively convince him not to sell it. And they don't reveal their identities, but they do say like, hey, we're going to let you in on a secret. We're your customers. This place means a lot to us. It really does all the things that you're hoping for in terms of giving like kids a safe haven, and ultimately convince him not to sell it, as the next day when they're in there as civilians, they see he's not selling it. It's an overall just really nice, simple story, and at the end it says for Richard, of course, because the actor that played Ernie passed away, unfortunately, many years ago, actually. And it was nice. I'm glad they included that. This package did have a couple of nice little stories that kind of highlighted smaller characters, which I think was nice. This one in particular, you can't get mad at it. It was a nice tribute to an actor that was in the series for quite a while, and the juice bar in general, I think, and Ernie's did have kind of this special place in the series in terms of, I often think about it with warm feelings of like, just the scenes of the Rangers being there at the end, especially the wrap-ups, and I talked about that a little bit when I reviewed Once and Always, how it was really nice to see the juice bar because it's one of the most nostalgic locations for it, so I really did enjoy that story. The next one is probably one of the two best ones in terms of the more meatier issues. It's an issue taking place in the main continuity, showcasing Tommy's relationship with Kat, primarily his wedding. It jumps around in time a little bit, showing them breaking up, presumably sometime after Turbo, when they went their separate ways, setting up Kat wanting to help out the world in other non-Ranger ways, kind of just highlighting Tommy's responsibility that he feels to the grid and finding purpose through it throughout his life. And it shows them initially separating and then reconnecting not long after the events of Dino Thunder. There's so many Dino series. Because she says, I heard about your adventures in Reefside. I thought you retired. And he says, wouldn't you be a Ranger again if you were called upon? And it kind of just highlights that, Tommy's responsibility to the grid, and he's always willing to re-Ranger up, and is kind of more passionate about being a Ranger than Kat, who found other ways to help people. But also the purpose of the issue, through showing their marriage and a little bit of their relationship after they have JJ, is that he's found other, meaning and purpose and home with his wife and his family and stuff like that. And it's an overall really nice story. I really liked it because, it kind of shows you some little details we didn't get to see, because of course in the show we just see Tommy as Dr. O, and then we see that he's, with Kat, like on the two team-ups, just sort of on the periphery and stuff like that. So it was kind of cool to see those little moments, and I was secretly hoping for a little bit of an origin to the Master Morpher in here, but we just see that he does have it sometime around his wedding, because he's using it there. And there's like a cool moment where, during the wedding, Tommy's late because he's being attacked by bounty hunters who are after the greatest Ranger ever, and he's actually saved by her wielding a power blaster in her wedding dress, which it was just a really nice story. It was probably my favorite of it because it was the most complete, and it was a cool one in the main story, filling the gaps of these characters that we've known a long time. The next one is an Alpha 5 focused one, primarily just focusing on his character, a bit about his early days, a little bit about Alpha 6's origins. It was another simple one, but I thought a really nice one. It just showcases when Alpha was first created on Edenoi, how he was specifically not given a directive, like a prime directive type of thing, so that he could come up with his own. And, it showcases him getting Zordon set up, and then initially Zordon's like, okay, we're good, we don't need, like, Alpha, bye. But they're like, no, give Alpha a chance, like, Alpha wants to stay here. And it just kind of goes through time, showing Alpha serving Zordon at various times. A little bit in the early days, it shows them that they were always observing possible Ranger candidates should Rangers ever need to be called upon. It did make me wonder, obviously we know about the 1969 team that happened before the MMPR team, what we know, which we presume was the first active one, especially based on Zordon learning some lessons about what went wrong there. But it made me curious if there was maybe any other points in time they could explore that he might have recruited Rangers. I don't remember if in the 1969 one he specifically said, "You're the first ones I've ever recruited," but there's room for him possibly to recruit like just one person, like as a Red Ranger or Blue Ranger or something. I think that would be kind of cool. That wasn't the point of this issue, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to think about. This was also in the main continuity, so I don't know if the 1969 team or any version of that is supposed to happen in the main continuity, but still, it made me think that that's a possible story for either version of the continuity, presumably the comics one. Yeah, and then it shows him all throughout just different eras, helping to cook for Rocky, Adam, and Aisha. Shows him prepping Alpha 6. It turns out he built Alpha 6. I assumed Alpha 6 just came with Demetria, like all the forces of good just had their own alpha, but he like actually made Alpha 6 as kind of his creation and downloaded the memories and got him to learn to appreciate the Rangers. And he's like, I wanted you to be able to appreciate and care for the Rangers so they're in the best hands, but I want, you finding this purpose here to be your own decision, your own directive, just like what, his master on Edenoi said to him, which I thought was a nice moment, and a nice little moment for Alpha 6 too, because even though, like a lot of people, I'm not the biggest fan of Alpha 6 1.0 with the yo yo yo, although admittedly it's a funny thing later, but I am a big fan of Alpha 6 2.0 from In Space, so it kind of was a nice little added bit of character legacy for that. But the biggest impactful moment was showcasing after he was on Eltar with Zordon, the moment Zordon gets taken and Zordon's like, "Get out of here, you'll be destroyed," and he's like, "Even if I'm destroyed, I could possibly be rebuilt, or my memories and whatever," and he basically says that finally reveals like his true purpose was always making sure his friend Zordon was never alone. And it kind of infers that Alpha was destroyed at that moment, or he would have been a few seconds later after Zordon got kidnapped, which I thought was really neat. Not that he got destroyed, but I mean, it was kind of a somber little but nice ending for his character, because I feel like his fate's always been left up in the air. I've seen a lot of people presume he was dead somehow because we didn't see him, but I never presumed that, just because I don't know, I don't feel like the writers of the show thought about it. Like, the reason we didn't see him is just because they probably didn't think about it all that much. So I always felt his fate was up in the air, but I like the idea of him sort of making the heroic sacrifice of willing to, sacrifice his life just to be there for Zordon to the end, even though, like he said, he could be rebuilt. So I thought that was a really nice story. The next one is the second best story in my opinion in terms of like more meaty stories, and it's more like a prelude issue to the upcoming Mighty Morphin Return series that's going to be written by Amy Jo Johnson, and man did it get me excited for it. It's basically taking place in an alternate universe in the future of the MMPR team dealing with this altered version of reality, and this one sets the status quo of, it's a little bit confusing in a way for me, but it basically sets up this idea of a universe, it seems, where Jason, Zach, and Trini didn't leave the team. Basically, it has this scene where they're like, "We're gonna go to the peace conference, like, we have to transfer our powers." They're like, "No, you don't, teleporting exists." Which I think is so funny, because that is so logical and true that, like, obviously we know the real world reasons why they left, and in the Shattered Grid, post-Shattered Grid continuity of the comic universe, we obviously have the Omega story, but it's a very logical, like, in-universe answer to that, and it showcases their lives going differently, showcasing their careers afterwards, that in this universe, for whatever reason, because those three didn't leave, Kim and Tommy get married, so this is kind of a nice what-if universe for people that are, like, still in denial that Tommy ended up with Kat in the Prime universe. And it is just confusing because it also shows that some darker things happened when Rita and Zed hooked up, and they like blew up the command center, and like we end up on this cliffhanger in the past of like they're gonna take the fight to them. But then we show the future too, where it seems like it's Kim going by the name of Emma Phillips. So I think it showcases that like they went on, and like in the background of the airport or whatever, you see like the moon is blown up. So I think it goes to show that like some good and happy stuff happened in the future, but also it's a darker timeline. It's very fascinating. Like, I was looking forward to the series, but this in particular, this issue got me really stoked for it. Like, I was like, I forgot that this was a prelude issue, and I was like waiting for more, and like, so this was an excellent prelude to that. I am just disappointed that it's basically just a teaser, but yeah, kudos to her. Really good first little part of that, and I'm really stoked for that series. I doubt this will happen, but it's almost, she's narrating it in terms of like, looking back at the good and the bad. I know we can't change it and only move forward, but it did make me question. I'm like, what if this is a weird timey-wimey story where like the ultimate resolution is Kim having to go back in time and like, this probably won't happen, but just, and like change it so that it goes the way it's supposed to. with, you know, the peace conference trio leaving and like maybe all of the events we know are key to a more peaceful future. I don't know. That just made me think about that. The last main story is this sort of Ranger Academy tie-in that's kind of in a confusing spot in the timeline. I assumed the Ranger Academy was taking place in the comic world, and I think this is, but it picks up with Billy like at university at grad school, and he's called by one of the Ranger Academy organizers who's like also a floating head, which is like just a funny, like this is the, you know, Star Wars Adventures, Power Rangers Adventures comic version of their Zordon, and he wants him to like talk to a student to mentor him. And it's a nice character scene for Billy because he like describes how he was originally afraid and how he was lacking confidence and felt like he needed to be like the other Rangers but just learned to trust himself. And it was a nice character moment for him, but I felt this was kind of a weak story for the Anniversary one. Like, again, it was confusing placed in the timeline no matter what universe it's in. But it also felt like it was just there to sort of prop up Ranger Academy, which I understand it, but it just felt like the weakest one. Like, it wasn't bad, but it was just kind of weak. And then the last story is just this few-page little issue that's basically just like what's a snippet of an MMPR episode of just the Rangers fighting against Goldar saying inspirational things. Like, it takes you back nostalgia-wise, but like no offense, it just felt like kind of a waste of a story. And then at the end, they have like just a compilation of all the different like morphing pages. I'll probably put up a picture, but also like I can show you too, because I bought the physical issue this time also. Like it's a bunch of different compilation of all the times they've morphed from like the beginning through currently when they all morphed together with Matt. And then something really neat they did at the end is they have a reading guide. A guide that shows you like the order to read so you can catch up for Darkest Day, which is really cool because I have seen people talk about how it's confusing to try to get into the comics now. You know, it's still nowhere near as confusing as my opinion if you're trying to jump in with Marvel and DC sometimes, but it admittedly has gotten a little bit muddled. So this is really neat, and I did self-promotion here, and I'll link it. I did do a video explaining that a little bit and breaking that down, but if you pick this issue up, this is, if like people want to know a good place to start the comics, pick this issue up and this will give you a little guide. So overall, I will say I did really enjoy this. It was a really nice issue with some really nice stories in it. Like I said, I really liked the Tommy Cat story, I really liked the prelude to Amy Jo Johnson's comic, I thought the Alpha and Ernie stories were sweet. I wasn't as interested in the Billy Ranger Academy one, and I felt like that random, like basically just an MMPR episode one was kind of a waste of space. It was an overall good package. I do have some mixed feelings on it because I felt like I was waiting for one big final story and it just never happened. I think it's maybe in part because you have that Ranger Academy tie-in and one of them is kind of like a preview issue to something bigger. It made it feel slightly incomplete as a package. Like, if I had to rate it overall, I think it's a 3 for the whole thing. I do think it was solid and really enjoyable, and if you're an MMPR fan, I absolutely recommend it. But I feel like as a package, I was like waiting for one more big story, and I think there was, because you have stuff like a teaser and a tie-in or whatever, that it felt like an incomplete weird thing, and I wish there was like one more, like I wish there was one more good meaty story at the end instead of the Ranger Academy tie-in and this weird, basically just doing an MMPR episode. I don't know like what the logistics are of like how much space you have, but also as cool as the little montage of the morphs was, just maybe not take up that space with that and have one more meaty thing. It just felt a little bit incomplete as a package, but the individual stories were really great stuff, like mostly like in terms of like the Tommy one and the Amy Jo one and the Alpha and Ernie ones. I would all give those like 3 or 4s out of 5, but like just as a package it felt a little bit incomplete. And I do have to say, I'm usually kind of a devil's advocate person when it comes to the MMPR, you know, focus, because like that is what sells and just we have to accept that. And I've said numerous times in terms of the main comic, I'd rather just read years of great MMPR stories than mediocre Sentai adaptations that we get. With that being said, I do kind of wish for the 30th anniversary, you know, especially since these kind of annual type of things are done with, you know, sometimes with more of the hardcore fans in mind. Not like in a we deserve it way, but I wish we would have been able to highlight all the seasons. Not all of them, like it would be crazy to have a story for each season, but, you know, it is the 30th anniversary of MMPR, I know, but it's the 30th anniversary of a long-running franchise with a rich history, and it would have been a cool opportunity to get an annual that would have had stories from all throughout history. Actually, it would have been cool if we could have gotten 2. One like this that celebrates just MMPR, and one that celebrates the whole franchise. I think just because usually when they do side issues like this, you know, it's not like we haven't gotten them. The main comic has to stay MMPR, but we've gotten a bunch of side issues that will allow them to dive into different seasons. And I think for the anniversary, this would have been a nice venue to celebrate it because we had once and always, you know, to celebrate just MMPR this year for the casuals and everything. And I think it would have been nice to get something that paid tribute to all of the series that contributed to after MMPR. Again, I'm usually a devil's advocate for that, but I think this would have been just a nice opportunity. Or maybe even try to include some other stuff somehow within the MMPR stories. Like, I was a little disappointed there wasn't a couple Dino Thunder characters that I saw in the Tommy Cat story. They might have been in the background of the wedding, but it would have been nice to see like a scene with them or something. I don't know. That's just my thought. I wish there was just some more celebration of the franchise overall instead of just MMPR when it came to this. But I still really did enjoy this, guys. Like, if you're a fan of MMPR and you're wanting some good Power Rangers content, I definitely recommend this. You know, you don't have to really have read any of the comics to enjoy this. Obviously, for certain stories, you have to watch some of the show, but you don't have to know anything about the comic stories to enjoy this. And like I said, if you're thinking about jumping on, this is a great spot because you can enjoy some really good stories, and it gives you a handy little reading guide at the end that might be able to give you some direction on where to start for the long-running series. But that is it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.